Atlanta always breathed differently after dark, its streets humming softly beneath layers of light and rain. Lena watched the city blur past the restaurant window, neon reflections stretching like uncertain promises across wet pavement. She told herself she deserved one uncomplicated night, one moment without expectations or history pressing against her ribs. Across from her, Marcus smiled with an ease she hadn't felt in years. Outside, traffic moved steadily, indifferent. Somewhere nearby, an Uber waited. Lena didn't know she was already stepping into a moment that would outlast explanations, apologies, and the comforting illusion that secrets remain private in a city built on intersections. Marriage had once felt like partnership, shared direction, and mutual patience. Over time, it became routine shaped by schedules, responsibilities, and quiet absences. Chris loved Atlanta's predictability, the comfort of knowing which radio station played during morning drives. Lena felt herself drifting, craving acknowledgement more than affection. When Marcus entered her life through a downtown conference, he noticed things Chris no longer mentioned. He listened. That attention became a doorway she didn't close. Atlanta's size made distance feel safe, anonymity believable. She convinced herself she wasn't betraying anything permanent, only borrowing a moment of warmth before returning to the life she knew. Dinner ended slowly, conversation lingering past empty plates and refilled glasses. Rain returned without urgency, tapping gently against windows. Marcus suggested calling a ride, his tone casual, unassuming. Lena agreed, relieved by the idea of postponing the walk home and whatever waited there. When the Uber arrived, she slid into back seat without really looking forward. The door shut, sealing them inside a moving pause. Soft music played. Atlanta's streets stretched outward, familiar yet distant. Lena leaned back, telling herself this ride was simply transportation, not a crossing. She was wrong, though she couldn't yet see how. As the car merged into traffic, Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. Lena laughed softly, nerves mixing with excitement. The city's glow made everything feel suspended, unreal. She glanced toward the driver, saw only a silhouette, and relaxed. The air smelled faintly of rain and fabric cleaner. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. The choice felt small, insignificant. Atlanta passed by in streaks of light, neighborhoods blending together. Lena convinced herself that movement equaled escape, that once the ride ended, she could step back into control. She didn't know the mirror had already tilted. The Uber slowed at a red light near Piedmont Park, brake lights reflecting across the windshield. Marcus's hand brushed hers, intentional and lingering. Lena didn't pull away. Her pulse quickened, awareness narrowing to the space between them. The driver adjusted the mirror slightly. She didn't notice. Outside, trees swayed gently, wet leaves catching light. The music continued, low and steady. Lena whispered something she wouldn't repeat later. In that moment, Atlanta felt protective, vast enough to swallow consequences. She believed she was unseen. She believed wrong. Recognition waited just inches away, framed neatly inside glass and silence. "Lena?" The driver said quietly, uncertainty cutting through the intimacy like cold air. Her body stiffened. That voice carried familiarity she hadn't expected. Slowly, she leaned forward, heart pounding, and met his eyes in the mirror. Aaron, Chris's friend, the man who'd helped move their couch, the man who laughed easily at backyard cookouts. The realization hit harder than anger ever could. Aaron's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The car kept moving, Atlanta traffic roaring around them. Marcus pulled back, confused. Lena felt exposed, suddenly visible in a way she couldn't undo. The ride had become something else entirely. "I didn't know it was you," Aaron said after a pause, voice controlled but strained. Lena couldn't respond. Marcus looked between them, confusion sharpening into concern. "What's happening?" he asked. Aaron hesitated, choosing honesty carefully. "I know her husband," he said. Silence filled the car, heavy and absolute. Rain streaked the windows, distorting the city beyond. Marcus's posture changed immediately, regret settling across his face. Lena stared at her hands, wedding ring catching light she didn't want. Atlanta suddenly felt small, its vastness collapsing into this enclosed space where coincidence had stripped her secret bare. No one spoke for several blocks. The music felt inappropriate now, and Aaron turned it off. Tires hissed against wet pavement. Lena's thoughts spiraled, moving faster than the car. She imagined Chris's face, the trust she'd already fractured. Aaron finally spoke again, calm but firm. "I can't pretend I didn't see what was happening." There was no accusation, just truth. That hurt more. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, staring out the window. The city lights blurred together, offering no comfort. Atlanta continued as always, unaware that three lives had collided quietly inside one ordinary ride. "I can end the ride early," Aaron offered, professionalism clashing with personal stakes. Lena shook her head. Ending it wouldn't erase anything. She needed to face the rest of this, however unfolded. The car exited toward Old Fourth Ward, murals sliding past in saturated color. She had admired these streets countless times before. Tonight, they felt accusatory. Marcus cleared his throat, but said nothing. There were no explanations that mattered now. Lena realized how thin the line between secrecy and exposure truly was. Atlanta didn't require intention to reveal the truth. It only needed proximity and timing. They stopped near Marcus's apartment. He opened the door, rain spilling in, then hesitated. "I didn't know," he said quietly, meeting Lena's eyes once more. There was regret there, but also distance. She nodded, accepting that whatever existed between them had already ended. Marcus stepped out, disappearing into the rain. The door closed. The silence afterward felt heavier. Only Lena and Aaron remained, bound by something neither wanted. Aaron drove on, steering toward Decatur. Street lights flickered overhead. Neither mentioned Chris by name, yet his presence filled the car completely, pressing against every unspoken thought. "You should tell him," Aaron said eventually, eyes fixed forward. It wasn't a threat, just certainty. Lena nodded, throat tight. She knew avoidance had already failed. The car passed familiar landmarks, grocery stores, intersections, the park where she and Chris once walked after dinner. Each memory felt sharper now. Aaron's phone buzzed with another ride request. He ignored it. Tonight wasn't about work. It was about consequence. Lena wondered how many rides Aaron had driven without knowing what waited in the back seat. Atlanta's roads carried more than destinations. They carried decisions, sometimes delivering them directly home. The car stopped in front of her house. The porch light glowed warmly, painfully ordinary. Aaron shifted into the park. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Not for stopping it, for how this will hurt him. Lena met his eyes, seeing disappointment rather than anger. "I know," she replied. She stepped into the rain, coat heavy, chest heavier. The Uber pulled away, taillights fading down the street. Lena stood still for several seconds, listening to Atlanta's distant hum. The city didn't judge her. It didn't need to. The truth already waited inside, seated comfortably in her living room. Chris sat on the couch. Television paused. Concern evident when he saw her. "You're soaked," he said. Lena removed her coat slowly. Her rehearsed words vanished. She sat across from him, hands clasped tightly. "We need to talk," she said. Chris muted the television completely. The click loud in the quiet room. Outside, traffic moved steadily, indifferent. Lena spoke haltingly at first, then with growing clarity. She didn't minimize anything. She didn't excuse herself. When she mentioned Uber, Chris's expression changed. "Aaron," he asked. She nodded. Silence followed, thick and unyielding. Chris stood, pacing slowly. He didn't shout. That absence felt worse. He asked questions calmly, each one landing harder than the last. Lena answered honestly, tears blurring her vision. When she finished, Chris stopped moving. "I need to leave," he said finally. "Not forever. Just now." He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside into the rain. The door closed softly. Lena remained seated, breath shallow. Atlanta's night pressed in around the house. She understood then that confession didn't guarantee forgiveness. Sometimes it only marked a moment everything irreversible finally became real. Chris didn't return that night. His phone went unanswered. Lena sat awake until dawn, replaying every choice that led here. When he came back the next afternoon, his expression was distant, resolved. "I can't do this," he said quietly. There was no debate, no anger left to fuel conversation. He packed a bag with deliberate care, avoiding her eyes. Atlanta traffic hummed outside as if nothing had changed. The normalcy felt cruel. When he left again, this time with intention, Lena understood the difference. Some departures aren't pauses. They're conclusions, written without room for revision. The separation unfolded without drama. Papers were filed. Conversations became logistical. Friends noticed a shift before explanations arrived. Aaron stopped calling entirely, choosing loyalty without explanation. Lena moved through Atlanta like a shadow. Familiar streets now tinged with regret. She avoided places she once loved. Everywhere held memories. Marcus never reached out. She didn't expect him to. The Uber ride replayed endlessly, stripped of excitement, reduced to exposure. Atlanta offered no anonymity now. It felt smaller, more watchful. Lena learned that accountability doesn't arrive loudly. It settles quietly, reshaping daily life until even ordinary moments carry weight. Lena moved into a small apartment on the west side, far from the life she'd shared. Nights were quiet, marked by traffic sounds and neighbors she didn't know. She stopped explaining herself. There was no version of the story that softened its outcome. Therapy helped her understand patterns, not undue consequences. Atlanta's skyline looked different from her new window, less romantic, more indifferent. She learned how quickly trust dissolves, how little intention matters afterward. Some lessons arrived too late to preserve what mattered. Lena accepted that growth doesn't guarantee restoration. Sometimes it simply teaches you how to live with loss honestly. Chris rebuilt without her, slowly and deliberately. They spoke rarely, only when necessary. His life moved forward, while Lena remained anchored to the moment everything fractured. She avoided rideshare apps altogether, choosing buses and long walks instead. Atlanta continued expanding, neighborhoods changing, people arriving and leaving. She noticed how easily the city forgot. She did not. The night in the Uber stayed vivid, not because of passion, but because of recognition. That was the moment her private self collided with reality. Chance had exposed what choice had already been decided. The city hadn't punished her. It had simply revealed her. Years passed. Lena learned how to be alone without dramatizing it. She built routines that didn't rely on forgiveness. On rainy nights, headlights streaking across wet pavement still triggered memory. She remembered the mirror, the voice, the pause. That ride didn't ruin her life. It redirected it sharply. Atlanta remained vast, vibrant, indifferent. She understood now that anonymity is temporary, that lives overlap without permission. Mistakes don't always explode. Sometimes they surface quietly, carried by strangers who aren't strangers at all. Lena carried the lesson forward without expecting redemption. Some truths arrive only to be endured, not repaired. Atlanta continued breathing, unchanged by her understanding. New buildings rose. Streets were renamed. Lives intersected endlessly. Lena walked among them, aware now of how thin privacy truly is. She lived more honestly, not because it felt noble, but because dishonesty no longer felt survivable. The Uber ride became a fixed point, dividing before from after. She didn't romanticize it. She respected it. In a city built on motion, it had forced stillness. Atlanta hadn't chosen sides. It had simply reflected her choices back to her, clear and unblinking, through a rear-view mirror she would never forget. Chris moved into a rented townhouse near East Atlanta Village, choosing a place with clean lines and no shared memories. He rebuilt his days deliberately, waking early, running quiet streets, learning how to exist without compromise. Friends avoided mentioning Lena, respecting the finality he carried. Atlanta felt different through independence, louder but clearer. He trusted his instincts again, even when loneliness followed. Some nights, he replayed the revelation, not with anger but resolve. Betrayal didn't define him, but it redirected him. He learned boundaries mattered more than history. In a city full of second chances, Chris chose self-respect over nostalgia and never apologized for that decision. Aaron stopped driving Uber. Within a month, he told no one why. The randomness unsettled him more than the discovery itself. Atlanta's streets had always felt manageable, predictable, until that night blurred personal and professional lines. He avoided Chris at first, then sent a short message acknowledging everything without justification. Chris replied once, simply thanking him for honesty. That was enough. Aaron returned to routine work, distancing himself from moments requiring mirrors or quiet. Sometimes he wondered how many truths he'd unknowingly passed before. Atlanta remained full of stories he would never hear again. He learned that integrity sometimes cost comfort, and he paid it willingly. Lena took a new job across town, shortening her commute, but lengthening her reflection. She focused on competence, not connection. Co-workers described her as reserved, reliable. None knew her history. Atlanta allowed reinvention easily, but she resisted false versions. She no longer chased excitement. She sought clarity. On weekends, she wandered neighborhoods she'd never explored, observing lives without intruding. Couples argued, laughed, and planned futures. She didn't envy them. She understood how fragile those moments were. Experience had taught her restraint. Desire without responsibility had cost enough. Atlanta offered endless movement, but Lena learned how to stand still within it, finally aware of the consequences. Therapy sessions became less about guilt and more about acceptance. Lena learned to name her choices without flinching. Growth didn't feel triumphant. It felt soothing. Atlanta's skyline framed many conversations about accountability, patterns, and self-worth. She stopped asking why things happened and focused on what followed. Some evenings, she wrote letters she never sent, acknowledging harm without expecting forgiveness. Closure didn't arrive dramatically. It settled gradually, like humidity lifting after a storm. She realized some endings don't require understanding from others. They require honesty with oneself. Atlanta remained loud and busy, but her internal noise softened, replaced by clarity earned the hard way. Chris began dating again cautiously, aware of what trust demanded. He didn't rush connection or dramatize distance. Atlanta provided options, but he valued discernment. He spoke openly about boundaries, uninterested in repeating old patterns. His confidence grew quietly. He learned solitude wasn't emptiness. It was space reclaimed. Sometimes he passed Decatur streets without looking. Other times, memories surfaced uninvited. He allowed it, then let it go. Healing wasn't forgotten. It was choosing not to live there. Atlanta rewarded momentum. Chris moved forward steadily, uninterested in explanations or closure conversations. He carried the lesson without bitterness, understanding that endings didn't require mutual agreement to be final. Marcus left Atlanta for a job in Charlotte, erasing himself cleanly from the narrative. He rarely thought about Lena, except as a reminder of limits crossed without foresight. The city shrank behind him as highways unfolded forward. He told no one the real reason he'd left. Shame didn't follow loudly. It lingered quietly, informing future restraint. Atlanta had taught him something without intention. Some intersections don't exist to be revisited. They exist to redirect. Marcus carried that awareness elsewhere, learning belatedly that desire untethered from context leaves wreckage behind. He didn't seek absolution. Distance felt sufficient, and he accepted that role without protest. Atlanta's seasons continued cycling, indifferent to private consequences. Festivals returned. Streets filled. Traffic remained relentless. Lena observed the city differently now, noticing how often lives overlapped briefly, then disappeared. She wondered how many moments changed trajectories without witnesses. The Uber ride felt less like fate and more like exposure. She'd already chosen her direction before the mirror revealed it. That understanding settled firmly. Responsibility didn't begin when she was caught. It began when she justified the first step. Atlanta hadn't intervened. It had simply reflected reality back to her. That distinction mattered. It shifted blame inward, where it belonged, and left no space for resentment. Sometimes Lena imagined Aaron driving past her apartment, unaware she lived there. The thought made her uneasy, not fearful. Visibility had become symbolic. She no longer wanted to be unseen. Transparency felt safer. She spoke more carefully, acted deliberately. Atlanta rewarded intention with stability. She built a life defined by restraint rather than longing. It wasn't exciting, but it was solid. She understood now that fulfillment wasn't found through escape. It came through alignment. The city thrived around her, offering endless temptation. She moved through it grounded, uninterested in shortcuts. Mistakes had narrowed her path, but also clarified it. She accepted that clarity without complaint. Chris received a promotion, relocating offices closer to downtown. The change energized him. New routines replaced old habits. He furnished his townhouse intentionally, avoiding replicas of his past. Friends noticed the difference. He smiled more easily. Atlanta's pace suited his independence. He no longer measured success through partnership. He measured it through peace. Occasionally, Lena crossed his mind, not with anger but acknowledgement. Their story had ended decisively. He didn't revisit it. Some chapters closed without reflection. He respected that. Atlanta's constant motion mirrored his own progress. He understood now that love didn't justify compromise of self. That lesson stayed with him, guiding choices forward. Lena volunteered occasionally, preferring quiet service over social validation. She avoided narratives of redemption. She didn't seek to balance harm with good deeds. Accountability wasn't transactional. Atlanta's nonprofit spaces taught her humility. Listening mattered more than fixing. She learned patience, an unfamiliar skill. Relationships remained sparse but honest. She valued truth now, even when it cost comfort. The mirror from that Uber ride lingered metaphorically. She faced herself daily, without avoidance. Growth felt unspectacular but real. The city remained full of noise, yet she moved calmly through it. Consequences had reshaped her priorities permanently. She accepted that shaping without resistance, understanding some transformations require loss to take hold. Aaron occasionally saw Chris at gatherings, their interactions cordial but distant. Neither attempted to restore what had changed. Respect replaced familiarity. Atlanta didn't encourage dwelling. Life moved relentlessly. Aaron accepted his role in the story without dramatization. He hadn't sought involvement, but he hadn't avoided the truth either. That mattered to him. He continued working, driving less, grounding himself elsewhere. Sometimes, when rain fell heavily, he remembered the sound against the windshield that night. It reminded him how thin separation between lives truly was. He remained cautious, not fearful. Integrity felt heavier now, but also steadier. Atlanta had tested it unexpectedly, and he hadn't looked away. Years softened the sharpest edges, but didn't erase them. Lena understood memory wasn't meant to fade completely. It served as reference, not punishment. She dated sparingly, choosing transparency early. She refused to build intimacy on omission. Atlanta's vast dating culture offered opportunity, but she approached it differently. She valued clarity over excitement. Some connections ended quickly, others never began. She accepted solitude as neutral, not failure. The Uber ride remained a fixed coordinate in her life, not revisited emotionally, but acknowledged structurally. Everything afterward had been shaped by that exposure. Atlanta hadn't forgiven or condemned her. It had simply continued. She learned to do the same. Chris married again eventually, quietly without spectacle. The ceremony was small, intentional. He didn't compare. He didn't look back. Atlanta's skyline framed new beginnings without commentary. His past remained part of him, but it no longer directed him. Trust returned gradually, supported by boundaries and communication. He didn't speak publicly about his first marriage. He didn't need to. Closure wasn't something he sought externally. It existed in his choices. The city provided continuity. Life layered itself forward. He learned that endings don't require acknowledgement from those left behind. They require resolve from those who walk away. He had walked decisively, and it had mattered. Lena heard about Chris's marriage through mutual acquaintances. The information landed without surprise. She acknowledged it privately, then let it pass. There was no urge to reach out. That door had closed completely. Atlanta thrived on overlap, but some lives diverged permanently. She respected that boundary. Her life felt quieter, but stable. She no longer imagined alternate outcomes. Regret existed, but it didn't dominate. She had learned how to live forward without rewriting history. The city offered countless reminders of movement. She followed its rhythm cautiously, aligned with herself. The mirror had shown her something essential. She had learned to live with that knowledge, not against it. Atlanta's rain returned one evening, heavy and familiar. Lena watched it from her window, headlights streaking below. The memory surfaced without pain, just clarity. She understood now that being caught wasn't the turning point. Choosing secrecy had been. Exposure only accelerated consequence. She didn't romanticize suffering or transformation. She accepted cause and effect plainly. Life feels honest now, even when it's difficult. The city continued expanding outward, indifferent to individual narratives. She appreciated that neutrality. It demanded responsibility, without judgment. Lena breathed deeply, steady. The past existed, but it no longer controlled her reactions. That distinction mattered more than redemption ever could. Aaron drove past that old intersection occasionally, though he no longer noticed it immediately. Time diluted significance. Still, something lingered. He remained attentive to moments requiring choice. Atlanta presented them constantly. He learned to recognize thresholds before crossing. That awareness felt earned. He hadn't been the protagonist, but he'd been a witness. That carried weight. He accepted it quietly. Integrity didn't require announcement. It required consistency. The city thrummed around him, full of lives intersecting unseen. He respected that complexity. That night had reminded him how quickly ordinary routines could become defining moments. He carried that awareness forward, not as a burden, but as grounding. Lena's life eventually felt ordinary again, though altered. She cooked dinners alone without resentment. She planned trips solo, appreciating autonomy. Atlanta provided endless distraction, but she no longer sought escape. She sought alignment. Relationships developed slowly, anchored in honesty. She didn't rush milestones. She respected boundaries fiercely, including her own. The mirror from that night had stripped the illusion away. What remained was responsibility. She lived with it calmly. The city continued offering temptation, anonymity, and movement. She navigated intentionally now, aware of how quickly lines blurred. Experience had narrowed her tolerance for self-deception. That narrowing felt like growth, even without applause. Chris sometimes drove ride-shares as a passenger, unbothered. He didn't avoid reminders. He integrated experience fully. Atlanta's roads no longer held emotional charge. They were simply paths. His life felt balanced. He didn't dwell on betrayal. He acknowledged it as information gained. That reframing freed him. He trusted again, not blindly. His happiness felt grounded, earned through clarity. He understood now that endings didn't diminish worth. They refined it. Atlanta continued offering noise, opportunity, expansion. He engaged selectively. He had learned that peace required intention. That lesson endured beyond relationships. It shaped how he lived, moved, and chose within the city that had once witnessed his unraveling. Lena occasionally wondered whether Aaron ever thought of her beyond that night. The curiosity faded quickly. Their connection existed only through circumstance. She respected its limits. Atlanta thrived on coincidence, not continuity. She no longer personalized outcomes excessively. She accepted that some interactions existed solely to redirect. That understanding simplified life. She didn't assign cosmic meaning. She was assigned responsibility. The Uber ride was not destiny. It was a consequence. That distinction grounded her. She moved forward without dramatization, uninterested in moral absolution. Growth wasn't theatrical. It was consistent. The city reflected that truth daily, rewarding those who adapted without denying reality. Lena adapted steadily and without illusion. Atlanta remained expansive, layered, restless. Lives intersected constantly without acknowledgement. Lena walked among them, aware of how quickly invisibility dissolved. She no longer sought it. She welcomed being seen accurately. Her life lacked spectacle, but it held coherence. She didn't reclaim what she lost. She built something different. That difference mattered. On nights when rain returned, she watched quietly, no longer triggered. Memory had transformed into reference, not wound. She understood that truth doesn't always heal relationships. Sometimes it simply ends them. That ending had reshaped her entirely. Atlanta hadn't offered forgiveness or punishment. It offered reflection. She lived with that reflection honestly, without resentment. Chris and Lena never crossed paths again. Atlanta allowed that separation despite its size. Their lives diverged completely. That distance felt appropriate. Stories don't always require convergence. Closure existed independently. Both carried forward without needing acknowledgement from the other. The city thrived on parallel motion. It didn't insist on a reunion. That neutrality reinforced finality. Lena accepted it fully. She no longer imagined conversations or apologies. Those belonged to an earlier self. Experience had replaced imagination. Atlanta rewarded forward momentum. She followed it steadily, not chasing meaning, but allowing it to form naturally through consistency. That approach felt earned, grounded, and sustainable in a city that never paused. Aaron eventually forgot the specific date of that ride. The feeling remained abstract, not sharp. Time softened edges without erasing principle. He continued choosing honesty reflexively. Atlanta's constant intersections no longer unsettled him. He understood unpredictability as part of movement. That acceptance felt mature. He didn't seek validation for past choices. He didn't regret them either. Some moments exist to confirm who you already are. That night, he did that. He continued living accordingly. The city offered endless opportunities to look away. He rarely did. That consistency mattered quietly, shaping his interactions without announcement. Integrity remained his compass, steady despite noise. Lena's life stabilized into predictability she once resisted. She appreciated it now. Stability felt earned, not confining. Atlanta offered stimulation without seduction. She engaged selectively. She no longer confused excitement with fulfillment. The Uber ride remained symbolic, not dramatic. It represented clarity achieved through consequence. She accepted that some growth required loss. That understanding freed her from bargaining with the past. She lived presently, responsibly. The city mirrored her approach, bustling without demand. She navigated it calmly, aware of boundaries. That awareness shaped her future choices decisively. She didn't seek absolution. She sought alignment. That alignment endured. Atlanta's roads carried countless untold stories nightly. Lena sometimes imagined them unfolding quietly, unseen. She understood how easily lives intersected without permission. That awareness fostered humility. She moved through the city respectfully, conscious of impact. Her actions aligned with values she now practiced consistently. The mirror from that Uber ride existed metaphorically everywhere now, reminding her to look honestly before acting. She welcomed that discipline. It kept her grounded. The city thrived regardless. Her life fit within it without friction. She had learned the cost of deviation. That lesson shaped her forward movement permanently, ensuring her future choices acknowledged consequence before desire. Years later, Lena understood the ride hadn't changed her path. It revealed it. Atlanta hadn't intervened. It had simply provided the setting where truth surfaced uninvited. She lived with that knowledge calmly, without seeking repair or revision. Some endings don't ask for forgiveness. They demand acceptance. The city continued pulsing around her, endless and indifferent. She moved within it honestly, shaped by consequence rather than regret. That night no longer haunted her. It instructed her. In a city built on movement, one brief ride had forced stillness, reflection, and permanent redirection. Atlanta didn't remember the moment. She did, and that memory guided every step forward.